And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford, and I'm joined by Keaton Nichols as we are going to talk about fantasy football. Yes, folks, we're back again another week talking about fantasy football with a crazy week 5 with a lot of action, a lot of players putting up big numbers in fantasy. You know, we're talking Taysom Hill, we're talking rookie running back Kenneth Walker the third scoring his first NFL touchdown on a 69-yard run. We're talking Justin Jefferson doing Justin Jefferson things. So we got a lot to talk about. Looking forward to this week in fantasy, which should be interesting as we will be also. This is the first set of bye weeks that are being also in play. So a lot of things fantasy managers are going to have to deal with heading to week 6. However, before we do that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. You're checking out the podcast here on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you can get your podcast from. Just search Total Sports Live, TSL Podcast. And also, don't forget to check out TotalSportsLive.com. Got a lot of good stuff on there. As you already know, the Eagles are in full swing. A lot of Eagles stuff up there. Phillies are still in playoff action. Phillies are there. Sixers starting very soon. Delaware Blue Coat starting soon. So we got a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline on TotalSportsLive.com. But you know who we got with me. You know, Keaton's joining me as always. We don't have Harrison with us this week as he's still feeling a little bit under the weather. He was a trooper last week on the show.
It was a game time decision.
He was a game time decision
this week.
He was a trooper last week, you know, having his gallon of water with him. Don't know how he made it through, but he did. But no Harrison. He's on the injury report this week. Questionable to return for next week, but it's us too. So how's everything going? Keaton back for week 6. A lot of great things, you know, that we got to talk about and look forward to because there's a lot of things fantasy managers have to look out for this week.
Look, man, I just want to pat ourselves on the back, first of all, for a few things. You didn't mention in the intro that Austin Eckler is the number 1 running back in football right now. Fantasy.
I'm about to say, fantasy. No, we don't want people to get angry and be like, did he just say Austin Eckler's the best running back in the league?
Derrick Henry?
Did he? Yeah. What about Nick Chubb?
Come on.
What about Saquon Barkley?
Take it easy, folks. Take it easy. Number 1 in fantasy. Sorry, finally got a hold of Austin Eckler this year. I feel like I miss him in every draft. So I got him in the big in the big league this year. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited he's the number 1 running back in fantasy. I'm ready for more 30-plus point weeks out of him and that offense. So, yeah, ready to do that. Also, the other thing before we get going, too, I don't know how your teams are doing overall. I did want to stop and ask about that, Joe, because I don't know if we really talked about it last week. All my teams, none of my teams are out of the playoff race. I'm like right around 500, I think, with all my fantasy teams so far. I've had some tough losses. I've had some high-scoring games, but tough losses in a couple of leagues. I take that as a sign of encouragement at this point in the year, and I think that a few of my teams, at least, are absolutely loaded with talent, and so I have a lot of room to potentially move talent around in some trades later this year. I'm proud of myself that I have not traded anybody at this point in the year. Was this week 6? I usually have 2 or 3 trades on the board at this point. So a couple of pats on the back there. And, of course, for our anytime touchdowns, last week we gave you we gave you a 3-leg parlay that you could play. And if you played that parlay, then you won some money.
Yeah, we definitely hit on that parlay. We're gonna talk about how that played out because it was a very interesting start to the week. Let's just say we did not have to wait long for that to
we were sitting there texting each other during the week. It's like 1:30. We're like, okay, first touchdown off the board. 1:45, second touchdown off the board. Maybe 30 minutes later, there's the third. I think it was Diggs was the third one. But either way, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, definitely good stuff. So we're going to talk about that later because it was definitely fun to track. And that's what we like to do. We like to give you guys, you know, all the information you need, but also give you some stuff to play responsibly. That's always,
of course,
you know, we like to play responsibly.
Always play responsibly.
So let's look forward to week 6. Like we said, week 6, this is going to be the first set of bye weeks that we have now. Bye weeks are officially now in play, which means as us fantasy managers, we have to do some maneuvering, some shaking at a lot of positions. The Raiders, the Lions, the Titans, the Texans, all have buys this week, which means you could be missing Derek Carr out of your lineup, Devontae Adams, Jamal Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, TJ Hawkinson, who I call Hawk Daddy.
Hawk Daddy.
Derrick Henry, Damian Pierce, the rookie, who's moving up in the rookie of the year odds right now, by the way.
Sure.
He's really starting to pick it up lately. And Brandon Cooks, who's just very consistent, Mr. Reliable down there in Houston, but you just never know because he plays for the Texans. So there's a lot of guys that are missing from that list. So me and Keaton before the show talked it out, and we're going to give you guys, just a few players at the skill positions, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and even at tight end that you can pick up for this week. Not saying that they're, who they're going against is a great matchup or whatever, but just guys who you can pick up who, if you're in a pinch or somebody, as we see that happens on every Sunday, a guy that you think is questionable, he's out, he's a late scratch, just some guys that you can pick up on the pinch and try to ride it out for just this week with the bye week. So you never know, he might perform well. And you might have someone that's on the bye week next week, and you can just switch them, keep them in your lineup. Right. So let's get underway talking about those quarterbacks.
Yeah, and just a caveat, just to add on to what you said, I mean, the names on this list that we're going to give you here, these are specific to this week, right? Like this is the first of bye weeks. We have injuries we've been talking about over the first 5 weeks as well. So these are definitely good options. If you want to call them streaming options for this week, potentially value after this week as well. You don't want to shake up the whole arrangement, and there's not really too much room to wiggle, I think, this year. It's been a weird fantasy year, Joe. Just super weird with, players that you expect to do really well that haven't done too well. Obviously, injuries affect every season, but overall, it's just kind of been rocky to deal with. So you don't want to, I think, upset the ship too much, but I think we got some good options here. Starting at quarterback, of course, if you don't have Geno Smith on your roster right now, I don't know what is wrong with you. I was listening to a podcast a little bit earlier that made the case for Geno Smith as, to put on your bench if you haven't picked up this guy already, because he's still available in, I think, 39% of leagues at this point, somewhere around there in ESPN format. Mm-hmm. So he's still available in a tremendous amount of leagues. And even if you've got a really good starter, if you've got Justin Herbert as your starter, if you've got Josh Allen as your starter, if you've got, Jalen Hurts as your starter, not just for injury, insurance, but these guys are going to have bye weeks eventually as well. There's been maybe 10 quarterbacks, and actually that number might be closer to 8 quarterbacks that you feel good about coming into the week every week, and one of those quarterbacks is Geno Smith. So yes. You probably don't have him on your roster already. There's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't be rostered in 70-80% of leagues. I would go as far as to say either as a starter or at the very least a really solid streaming option whenever your quarterback is on a bye, and it could be Derek Carr. So there's definitely that. If you've invested high draft stock in a quarterback as well, like I did with Russell Wilson, I've been trying to stay with the Russell Wilson kitchen cuisine all year, and it just hasn't worked out. I'm at a point now where I've, Joe, I got in our league, in the TSL league, I've now benched Russell Wilson, and I picked up Geno Smith as my starter. Now, I'm not quite to the point where I'm going to bench Russell Wilson, but you may be in this similar position if you've got guys like Aaron Rodgers, rather, that have disappointed this year. We talked about, expecting more out of, if you drafted Tom Brady potentially as your starter, and he's kind of, fair to Midland in there. If you've got, one of the injured quarterbacks, Trey Lance, Dak Prescott, you may be in a situation where not only is Geno Smith a pretty decent option to pick up for this week, but maybe for season-long format too.
Yeah, no, Geno is, like you said, he's just been balling this season. He's been efficient with the ball, and he's just been making the right play, and he's been getting his playmakers involved. And Geno is, someone who I also have my eye on in daily this week, in daily fantasy this week. I think on FanDuel, he's like 74,000, so you could stack him and DK together. I don't like FanDuel DFS just because their pricing's a little bit helter-skelter, a little bit high, a little bit. So I play DraftKings, but if you want to stack Geno and DK, who I think have a very good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals this week, you got Geno at 5,700, DK at 6,800. That's not bad. That's only taking up about, if I do the quick math, we're talking about
Less than a third of
only
your overall
12,
roster of your overall.
15,000. Then you still got about
Yeah.
37,000 to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad one. So Geno's definitely someone, like Keaton said, that you can get in a season long, because you know he's going to be the starter all year too. That's something that we also have to keep in mind. He's going to be the starter. He's earned it. Drew Lock is, even if Geno has a bad game, Drew Lock is not stepping on that field for how he's commanding that offense right now.
Yeah, and add value to your team. Like there are certain times. That's what I was saying about if you have a starting quarterback already,
and there is value with Geno. That's the crazy part. There is
add value. Yeah, add value to your team. I mean, that could be. It's not going to be the Geno may not win you your league per se, but the value that Geno brings to your team at the price that you can get him right now, which is nothing in 40% of leagues. But the price that you can get Geno right now extremely low. The price that you did get Geno is an extremely low price. So that's the way that just another back end way of adding value.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Geno, just look at his numbers. He's thrown for 2 touchdowns in every single game this season, except the game in San Fran, where they lost 27-7. Just saying. When you're at least getting 2 touchdowns every game from him, you're going to be in a great fantasy set.
He's the number 6 quarterback. He's the number 6 6. Like that's no easy feat in the NFL to be consistent after 5 weeks, right? Now we're not saying it's a 3-week sampling, or he had a couple games where he was hot.
5-week sampling.
5
First,
weeks.
We have a quarter of the season sampling.
Absolutely, I'm big on Geno. He's got good weapons too. Let's not forget that.
Exactly. Anytime you got DK and Tyler Lockett, now you have the rookie Kenneth Walker III, who's replacing Rashard Penny. Sad to see Rashard Penny go down with the fractured fibula.
Yeah, we'll see him next year, probably on a different team. But it's just another opportunity. Again, tons of options in that offense to work with for Geno. I bet somewhere, the Wolverine meme where he's like looking at the photo of what he misses. I'm sure that's Russell Wilson missing DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I mean, he hasn't gotten the same production in Denver. That's a different podcast. But Geno Smith certainly. I think is taking advantage of those options, and I think we see who got the better end of that deal. Ironically, I think it's Geno. Yeah,
Geno's definitely been the winner so far through the first 5 weeks of the season. Another quarterback that people should keep their eye on, and we're talking about a rookie who was drafted in the 7th round this year. Miami Dolphins quarterback Skylar Thompson, who lit up the preseason. He was one of the preseason stories this summer of just how he just came in and really looked the part when he was under center. This was a guy who had a solid career at Kansas State, dealt with some injuries, but if you watched him, you knew that when you watched him that he had, some talent. And it's good to see him, playing. And now he played last week. He played last week against the Jets, stepping in for Bridgewater, who suffered a concussion. But it seems like he should be active for Sunday, but still probably not enough time to get him up to speed. So it's going to be the Skylar Thompson show. And this is a guy, again, I picked him up in a league I'm in just because I had Derek Carr as my starter. So this is one of those situations where I need a streamer in a pinch, and I'm calling on Skylar Thompson to be that guy in the pinch, just because I'm looking at him going against a Minnesota defense who, they can do something. They can make a little bit of noise, but they're only allowing 16.8 points, fantasy points to quarterbacks this year in standard leagues. That's not bad. If I can, and this is my thinking, I think he had 14 last week. If I can get Skylar Thompson between 14 and 16 points, and if I get upward, we're talking like 18, 20, then that's a win. That's a win. Oh, sure. And it's not impossible based off the weapons that we know the Dolphins have, right?
Yeah.
They have Jalen Waddle, they have Tyreek Hill, they have Mike Gesicki, who's kind of been really an afterthought, which is very surprising to see after the year he had last year. He's kind of been he's been a crazy afterthought, but you have those guys. You have Raheem Mostert, who ran the ball really well last week against the Jets, and you have Chase Edmonds, who still trying to figure it out in that offense, but another guy who can be a valuable weapon for them in the passing game. You also got Cedric Wilson, Trent Sherfield, River Craycraft. It's a whole bunch, a whole collection of dudes here.
The path to 15, 16, 17 points is not crazy.
No, it's not. And we saw Waddle and Hill. They didn't have the best of games last week against the Jets, as the Jets really just bowled over the Dolphins 40-17. But I have to think that Waddle and Hill get it together and really go off against this Vikings secondary, which we saw give up a couple big plays against the Lions, against the Eagles this year. So they're capable of giving it up in the passing game, and Will and Waddle will put pressure on them. So I'm excited to see Skylar Thompson get on the field and, for his first NFL starter and see what he can do in that offense. That's
a full practice. Full week of practice, and he's not coming in the middle of the game, as the third stringer. I think a quarterback's mentality going into a game like that is going to be much different. So, again, if you're trying to throw a dart at the board, I mean, Skylar Thompson is definitely available in your league. I can tell you that. I don't have to go over the numbers. I can tell you he's available in your league right now. So, again, looking for an opportunity if you've got Derek Carr and you didn't necessarily plan for grabbing a quarterback. Maybe somebody grabbed Geno out from underneath you this week. Why not take a chance on Skylar? He's got some weapons, like you said. And I just like the idea of a full practice week for Skylar Thompson. We'll see what he looks. He looked pretty good in the preseason, as you mentioned, and a much easier test in that Minnesota secondary this week, coming off that London. What were they in London last week? Yeah.
Week before.
What's the other place?
Before.
There you go.
Week before they were in London. So
might have left their secondary in London. Who knows?
Who knows? Hopefully. I got Skylar Thompson, so I hope that is the case. It's Total Sports Live podcast here. Jovan, Alford with Keaton, Nichols, talking some fantasy, looking at some options that fantasy managers can pick up with about 4 teams on the bye week. And let's move on from quarterback, Keaton. Let's talk about running back, because like we talked before the show, running back is a little bit scarce right now at the position. And I don't know if it's because guys aren't showing up or we're just in a situation. And let's be real, I don't want to call nobody out, but we got people hoarding running backs in leagues.
If you have running backs in your league,
there's people out there that have like 4 or 5 guy running backs on their team, and they just like
and just sitting out and won't trade them, anything else like that. The situation for running backs has been bad. And again, maybe a topic for another podcast is, what's the importance of running backs in fantasy football, in real life football, how that's all related. I may be jumping a little bit ahead of the gun in terms of what the culture in the NFL is going to end up being for running backs and the importance of running backs. But again, just listening to a commentary earlier this week about running backs, they're oftentimes not paid until they're reaching the peak or maybe even on the downside of their prime. And oftentimes I think that is creating an environment in the NFL, especially with more passing and a quicker pace and things like that, where we're just moving away from having bell cow running backs. I can't really think of a guy. Derrick Henry is obviously is the big name on
Nick
the
Chubb.
list, and Nick Chubb. I'm sorry,
that's it.
We always forget that. But
other
than those two guys, I mean, and even Eckler. Look at Eckler's
he's
rushing yards.
He's a different. He's a different version of the bell cow, right? He's a
20 to 30 touches a game, but not 20 to 30 carries a game.
Correct.
So we're moving away from that in general. I think all the numbers support that as well. So there's been, I know if you've been paying any attention to football this year, that fantasy football especially, that the running back position has been shallow, and that's a nice way of putting it. But just as we move forward throughout the year and we move into next season and seasons in the future, I think we should all start thinking about that. When it comes to our first round picks, I mean, how oftentimes in a draft or the first 10, the first 10 or 12 guys, 8 of them are elite running backs or 7 of them are elite running backs. That may be starting to shift over the next couple of seasons. We've seen top running backs this year, not named Austin Eckler, thank you very much, that haven't really lived up to their draft expectation. I'm looking at you, Najee Harris. I'm looking, I'm looking at you, Dalvin Cook. Like, there's a few guys on that list that you paid a lot of draft capital for, and they're not turning out too well. So, with all of that being said, as we look at who's going to be missing this week, Well, Jamal Williams is going to be missing this week, but Derrick Henry, Damian Pierce. It
Josh
also means that
Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs is missing, from this list, from this week as well. So when it comes to running back, you got to get creative, and think of it more so in a position of how can I get value out of this guy. You're just not going to find a guy that's going to take on 20 to 30 carries in a
No.
league. You're especially not going to find him on the waiver wire. You got to get really lucky. But I think that if you're trying to tilt those percentages in your favor, a guy like Mike Boone in Denver is a really good choice this week especially. It's not that I don't believe in Melvin Gordon, but look at what they're doing with Melvin Gordon over the last couple of seasons. You bring in Javonte Williams last year as a rookie. You use high real-life draft capital to get Javonte Williams there in Denver because they like what they see in him. But I think a choice of promoting, if you will, Javonte Williams to that position said in a way that, Melvin Gordon, you're going to be our secondary at best, our second option, at running back. And I think that, call me crazy, but I don't think that they're willing to necessarily just shift and move Melvin Gordon. I'm talking about the Broncos now, moving Melvin Gordon into that starting role at running back simply because he is the quote unquote next best, or next most skilled running back on the roster. I think that Mike Boone has a role in this offense. We saw a little bit of that role last week, despite being a terrible game to watch with your eyes. We did see Mike Boone similarly in that role. And this week he faces a Chargers defense that has stopped, and I'm just looking at my numbers here, Jovan. It says that they have stopped no one this year on the ground. They've had a couple of really good rushing attacks against them the last couple of weeks, but nothing elite. Nothing that I think that this, Denver Broncos, running game can't handle. I think there's plenty of work here for Mike Boone, who might get into the end zone as well. So if he's not picked up in your league, go out and get this guy as a streamer for sure if you're a Josh Jacobs owner.
Yeah, Mike Boone is a good one. I know when Javonte Williams first went down, and it was like, all right, who's behind Melvin Gordon? It was like Mike Boone or Latavius Murray.
Yeah.
It's like those were the two guys that people were going for. And like you said, Melvin Gordon he's okay, but he's not, like you said, he's not the featured back out there. He's going to be sharing time with Mike Boone. So that's a good one there. Another guy that we had on our list is rookie running back for the Bucs, Rachaad White, a guy who, again, he's not going to take the rushing yards away and the carries away from Leonard Fournette. That's not him. However, he's 6'2", 210 pounds. He's going to be used a lot in that passing game, and we're starting to see that more and more over the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, he only has 8 carries for 20 yards. That ain't nothing. However, we look at what he's doing in the receiving game. Last 2 weeks, 8 catches for 78 yards. So you're starting to see him being utilized in that passing and giving the Bucs another option, just because we know tight end right now is really in flux for them. They don't really have that Gronk no more at tight end, and the wide receiver core, really outside of Mike Evans, has been dealing with injury. Chris Godwin was hurt. Julio Jones has been banged up. Rashard Perryman has been hurt. Russell Gage has been hurt. So a revolving door at wide receiver, which means you have to get creative in using your running backs in the passing game. And we're starting to see that with Rachaad White, like I said, in the last 2 weeks, getting active in the passing game and starting to see a snap count go up. Week 4 against the Chiefs, played 24 offensive snaps, 38%. And then we saw last week against Atlanta, 31 offensive snaps, 39%. So we're starting to see a snap count go up, which is a very good sign. He's getting those targets. And again, he's a guy we're not saying the same thing with Mike Boone. We're not saying these are guys that you make RB2. Like, we're not saying that. But these are guys who, if you're in a pinch and you need a flex, you could feel comfortable with those guys being a flex option. Not everybody has great flex options, but these guys could be those, sub-in flex options, especially this week when you're looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, who pass defense is really not their thing.
Especially
this year,
not to running backs. And
yeah.
this game actually, I don't know, I don't want to get out ahead of myself here, but it's a rookie quarterback. I know they're going to be at home. The Steelers are. So that gives you some confidence there, but you're still talking about Tom Brady in that offense coming into Pittsburgh, a Pittsburgh team that's, how can I put this kindly? Trying to find their footing.
Yep.
Didn't have a good taste in the mouth from last week in Buffalo. So I don't necessarily know if that bodes well for them. I don't necessarily think that, Pittsburgh's going to be playing in a close game or with the lead at any point in this game. But so that does give you a little bit of favor, you'd think, towards the running backs.
Right.
With two monsters on the outside, maybe the Steelers' focus is there. So, again, this week could be a pretty good week for Rachaad White. But, again, adding value on the back end of your team with guys like this, I think that's one of those moves. If you have a roster spot, I'm not saying go out and drop a productive guy or whatever else like that. But maybe you have Rashad Penny on your roster this year. You had to drop Rashad Penny and you have an open slot. Maybe you weren't able to get Kenneth Walker, but you have another, sort of empty position on your roster. That's the situation to get Rachaad White.
Yes, 100%. And then our last running back that we have on our list, Keaton, is Eno Benjamin.
Yes, Eno Benjamin. I like Eno. He actually reminds me a lot of Chase Edmonds. In a sense.
Yes,
I mean, maybe
and that's the role he's playing. That's the role he's playing because we saw in KC. I mean, did he play in KC? Where did he play before? Where did Eno Benjamin play before?
Eno Benjamin was in Washington. I'm not sure actually.
I'm looking it up. I'm looking it up right now. He
another
was
one of those scat back roles.
Oh no, Arizona. Yeah, because he was drafted by Arizona. For some reason, I was getting Eno Benjamin mixed up with Darrell Williams.
Oh, from Kansas City. Yeah.
So,
no, but
Eno was drafted
plays
by
that
the
role.
Cardinals. Yes.
Yeah. He plays that role. Probably a part of the reason why you see Chase Edmonds in Miami right now, at least in part of that decision. But this one's real simple. I mean, if James Conner sits, I think he's going to be a really good streaming option. If James Conner plays, again, this is kind of another one of those add value to the back end of your roster. Because we've known, unfortunately, that James Conner does struggle with injury.
Yes.
He hasn't played anywhere close to a 16-game season at any role at any point in his career. He's a very talented guy. I like James Conner a lot. But again, as an insurance policy, adding value to the back end of your team, and a guy that's pretty darn talented too. A passing offense, I think it's a top 5 in terms of frequency. How often the Arizona Cardinals pass, rather. I think Benjamin kind of makes sense in that role. Adam, again, if you have the slot, if you have the availability, you're not going out of your way to get Eno Benjamin on your roster.
I'm glad you keep hammering that point. Like you said, we're not telling folks go drop player X to go get these guys, but if you do have a spot, why not pick him up just to see what he could give you in a pinch, or even if you want to get creative in DFS and get these guys. I'm pretty sure Rachaad White, Mike Boone, Eno are probably going to be
dirt cheap.
Are going to be dirt cheap, which will again free you up some salary cap to go bigger and pay up at more at other premium positions, probably at wide receiver, even at running back. You go cheap with one of these running backs.
One of them,
you could pay up for a Saquon Barkley or the top running backs, Nick Chubb, for example, or any of those guys in DFS. So that's the point that we're hitting there. When we're talking about be smart about it. And we got 2 more guys before we talk about wide receivers to trade for, and that is wide receiver and tight end. At wide receiver, we got Alec Pierce on the list, the rookie out of the University of Cincinnati, a guy that a lot of people really had a lot of expectations for coming into the year. He started, I think he missed a couple of games beginning of the year, or missed like one or two, I think, due to injury, but he's really come on as of late for the Indianapolis Colts, who are desperate to have a number 2 receiving option opposite of Michael Pittman. We saw when Pittman Jr. was out, along with Alec Pierce. Ashton Doolin stepped up in that place. He really showed out well. But again, it's Ashton Doolin. No disrespect, but he was serviceable. But again, need another receiving option, especially because even tight end is at flux for the Colts. You don't know if it's going to be Jelani Woods one week, or is it going to be Kyle Granson, or is it going to be or is it going to be Mo Alley Cox? Like, exactly, you don't know.
You don't know
who's it going to be. You don't know who it's going to be. But Pierce had really stepped in. What I think is very encouraging, Keaton, about this is that since he's come back from injury in week 3, he's got a consistent target share, and I think that's very, very good. Week 3 against the Chiefs, 3 receptions, 5 targets, 61 yards. Week 4 against Tennessee, 4 receptions, 6 targets, 80 yards. Against the Broncos, 8 receptions, 9 targets, 81 yards. He's a guy who I feel very comfortable with if I have a roster spot where, like for me, for example, I had Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch has been replaced by Rondell Moore in the Cardinals offense, which is very disappointing to me. I went and picked up Alec Pierce because I'm like, the dude's getting targets. He's clearly the number 2 wide receiver out there.
Yeah.
And when I see targets going up and being consistent on a team that's devoid of talent at another position, it seems like a match made in heaven there. And he's still available in 7, and he's only rostered in 17.9.
That's crazy.
ESPN leagues right now.
That is absolutely crazy. Get you a piece of Alec Pierce. There's a lot of really talented wide receivers, but again, I'm going to keep hammering home. Today's going to be just the value play show for me, because this is another guy that's going to add so much value to your team, a guy that you could slot in at the flex, even as wide receiver 2, maybe on a week like this where you're hit and affected by buys. But get this guy on your team now. You're adding value, absolutely. Matt Ryan, we've been able to see, I know it's a different Matt Ryan that we're seeing probably this year in Indianapolis, but we've seen that he's been able to pilot an offense that is capable of carrying 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers. So it's not totally crazy to think that even with Pittman as the, a number 1, that whoever's in that on the other side of the field is going to eat. And it seems like he and Matt Ryan, as you said, are finding some comfort with each other too. I find that stat crazy though. 17.9% of ESPN leagues. What is wrong here? Like, is there just like a influx of wide receivers? I don't know. But if you don't have Alec Pierce on your roster, to your point, Jovan, this is a good week to add him right now before he blows up. I think one more good game in a row would give him 3 in a row. That's usually the indication for a lot of fantasy managers.
If he has 70 yards this week, that'd be 4 games in a row where he's had
70
over 60
yards, right, or something like that, right?
He's that number is definitely going to increase.
Yeah,
in a heartbeat. And we got one more guy, and that's the tight end position. He's the touchdown vulture, the touchdown thief.
It's the nice way of putting it.
In the Saints offense, and that is Taysom Hill,
yeah,
who is rostered at tight end, but last week, monster performance, 3 rushing touchdowns, 9 carries for 112 yards, 34 fantasy points. Again, you're not expecting him to score 34 fantasy points every week, even though it's really possible at this point because you just don't know, especially with Andy Dalton at quarterback. However, Keaton, he's only rostered in 42% of leagues, and it seems like the Saints definitely want to make sure he's involved in this offense at every staple, and especially even in the red zone, because we saw early season he scored a touchdown inside the red zone.
Yeah, and he's been popular in that way. It's weird. I cannot stand talking about Taysom Hill in fantasy. He bothers me so much, and the reason being, everything is just wonky with this whole situation. Taysom Hill is clearly a quarterback. He is a back at the very least. We can all agree on that. I don't know why this wonky system of scoring. I know he's like that in ESPN leagues. I don't know if he's like that in CBS or Yahoo leagues as well, but listed as at tight end. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, I think he's an absolutely unrosterable player if he's a quarterback. And as a tight end, it just makes it's still true. I still think that he's unrosterable. I don't think that you should roster Taysom Hill as your tight end.
They should just change his position to fantasy to just flex.
Just a flex, yeah. Running back, wide receiver, whatever. I know we used to do that with Ty Montgomery back in the day, and there was at least 1 or 2 other players that listed. But either way, the point being, I think it's, I don't think he should be rostered. With that being said, tight end for years and years and years, we've known this, has been just one of the toughest positions to get production out of. And just with one really monster performance at 34 points last week, against Seattle. He had a game, the first game of the year, he had 15 points as well. But other than that, he's had absolutely nothing, and he's still the number 7 scoring tight end, because you're not really a tight end, but whatever.
Right,
He's the 7th
right.
scoring tight end right now in fantasy football. So, with that being said, he's a dart throw if you become desperate. If you've got a guy on your, if your starting tight end is, and I'm trying to think of a name here, I don't know, Cameron Brate.
Yeah. Irv Smith Jr.
Mo Ali Cox, as you mentioned, or Alberto or Irv Smith, like one of these guys.
Or Robert Tonyan.
Yeah, Robert Tonyan. Because there's games this year where you could maybe get 0 points out of your tight end. I mean, like games that he plays and you're getting 5 points or you're getting 8 points, out of your tight end. So if you're saying to yourself, I have a week where I need, some sort of influx of points. I got guys hurt. Maybe I had a Thursday night dud or something like that. There's a potential that you throw a dart at Taysom Hill in the hopes that he does have a game like he had last week. But please do not roster Taysom Hill as your starting tight end this week because he had a 34-point game last week and you think that this is going to give you some sort of advantage. You're going to, congratulations, play yourself if that happens, I'm telling you. He is a frustrating player to deal with, but to your point also about Andy Dalton, getting back to my original point, Taysom Hill is a quarterback, so I think we're going to see a lot more packages with Taysom Hill while Jameis Winston is out of the game. It seems like when Jameis Winston is in the game, he's the quarterback, and when they try to institute Taysom Hill into it, they're picking and choosing the certain times, and they're yanking him right back out of there, whereas I think you can start to get a little bit more creative when you have Andy Dalton at QB.
100%. So, yeah, like you said, Taysom Hill, don't go ahead and start him. Just be conscious because, like you said, he can have this out and then he can be a non-factor for other games. So just be
cautious. I mean, if you're in a 12, 14, 16 team league,
then I get it.
I understand,
especially if you're in a 14 or a 16 team league, then I get it. Then
for sure, then he's maybe a better option, like I said, than some of those names that I just threw out there. The guys that are going to get you maybe 5 to 8 points in a week. That's not going to win you. That's not going to win you your league. So again, if you're in a position where you need that, and you know that you need that high end, you're going to need a big performance out of your tight end position. Yeah, take a flyer instead of saying I'm going to punt on the 5 to 8 points I'm going to get from one of these other guys. Sure, but 12 or more.
Taysom Hill is a much better option than Albert O at this point.
Yeah. As I've come to find out, very hard in some leagues this year.
Yeah.
Denver offense. That's a whole podcast too, right there.
Right, in a nutshell. So we got a couple more things to talk about here before we wrap up the podcast. Talking about Week 6 fantasy football, and let's talk about. We did this last week. We did running backs to trade for, good value, bad value. Now we have wide receivers to trade for. We got a couple of guys who we listed as cheap trades. We got some couple of good values. And we can't say buy low for this guy because he's a running back. So we got cheap. We got
There's no such thing
trades.
As buy low in running backs this year. No.
Right. So we just have for wide receivers. We got a couple of guys for cheap trades, and we have a couple of guys for good value. So Keaton, start us off. We got a couple of guys here for the cheap trades. Who do you think that people can pick up right now as we're inching closer and closer to the halfway point? Guys who they can pick up who don't have really high roster share, but you can flip maybe a RB2 for them, or another wide receiver for one of these guys.
Yeah, and again, I'm hammering it home. Value. And the first name on this list, Michael Gallup, huge value that you're going to get. He started out the year hurt, so if he was rostered at all, probably not in a whole lot of leagues until last week or the week before. Still at this point, I think, and I lost my sheet here, I think he's rostered in about 40%, or like maybe 45% of leagues.
Sounds about right.
Wrong on that.
Sounds about right.
But yeah, somewhere around that. So about half the leagues at this point. You might want to check your roster, check your league, see if he's available. He's coming back, and he kind of steps into the role as the number 2 in this offense. And there's a couple of things that in this Dallas offense, and there's a couple of things that people need to realize about what's getting ready to happen with that Dallas offense. The first one is that, let's make no mistake, there might be a lot of, fluff and talk and whatever going on, Cooper Rush will not be the starting quarterback when Dak Prescott is back. Let's be completely 1,000% clear. They paid this dude like half the cost of AT&T Stadium to stay there and play quarterback. Of course, they're going to play Dak Prescott. But anyway, when Dak Prescott comes back, this is going to be an offense that can support 3 receivers. I don't know if that's going to be 2 receivers and a Dalton Schultz, 3 wide receivers with a sprinkle of Dalton Schultz, whatever it is. That's what this offense, I think, is going to allow. We talked about it before the show, Joe. We're not going to talk about Ezekiel Elliott for a number of reasons right now, but the Dallas run game is like whatever, man.
Right.
And I think that if Dallas wants to win games this year, they're going to put the ball in Dak's hands, and they're going to say, come on, win us the game here, do something. And that's going to mean that there's going to be a lot of yards for CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, somebody's going to be catching it opposite of him, and that's going to be Michael Gallup. He looked like he eased back into the offense perfectly well last week. Still not rostered in over 50% of leagues, so go out and get him if he's available. If somebody's got him on their roster, they're likely not starting him. They're not streaming him, anything else like that. Go get him. Go trade, as you said, one of those, those cheap pieces to get a Michael Gallup on your roster, because whoever has him on their roster right now might not be adding too much value if they've been okay with him being either on the bench or hurt for the first 5 weeks. So just again, added value.
That's all, and that's literally all you're looking for. You're just looking for added value, and he's definitely a added value type of guy. Because, like you said, when he's healthy, he's a very good wide receiver, and the perfect complement to CeeDee Lamb. Last year, it was like, damn, Michael Gallup's wide receiver 3 with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, because you just knew he's that talented to be, a number 2 wide receiver. Now he's going to get that opportunity, and like you said, the more he continues to play and gets time, and Dak comes back, definitely going to pick it up in the receiving core, which is going to be good news for the Cowboys, but also good news for fantasy managers. And another guy we had on this list is from your Pittsburgh Steelers. That's George Pickens. Mr. Pickens has been a very good wide receiver for a rookie, number 1, but number 2, I think we can all say that he has surpassed Chase Claypool as the Steelers' number 2 wide receiver, because it's very clear that him and Kenny Pickett have a rhythm and a connection, and the stats don't lie over these last 2 weeks, Keaton.
He's exploded, and the talent was always there. And a couple of things. We love Chase Claypool. We think he's an immense talent, but Chase Claypool's stock has been going down. He had a game a couple of seasons ago, I think this is now, against your Philadelphia Eagles, right?
Yep.
Four touchdowns in that game. And I think that we all saw that flash of brilliance. He was running ends around. He was doing all types of stuff. He was leaping over defenders. And we say, this is the athletic freak that is going to be the next great wide receiver here in Pittsburgh. And then they go and draft George Pickens, a physically similar sort of wide receiver. And you're like, what? But when you look at it, the idea of it again, the stock has been crashing on Claypool for a while now, not just since that game. And I think George Pickens' talent, which was already on display earlier this year, had an amazing catch from a terrible throw. So now he's got chemistry with a guy that he's built up with in training camp in Kenny Pickett. We still don't really know overall what we're going to get from Pickett in the Steelers offense. We just know that it's going to be more electric than the first 4 weeks or so that we saw of Mitch Trubisky. So George Pickens is a good pickup. If he's a little bit more trendy of a pick, because I think some of the more national publications are starting to point in his direction. So he might be available in less than maybe 40% of your leagues or something like that. But if you can get him right now, if you can trade for him right now before his value sort of explodes, this would probably be one of the last weeks, if not the last week, that you could take advantage of that value.
Definitely, I would agree with you. I think this is one of the last weeks, because even if he doesn't score a touchdown but has almost a similar stat line against that Buccaneers defense, then he's definitely going to blow up more, and definitely people are going to be a little bit more reserved to keep him wrapped up. He's also another guy who I really like in DFS this week, just because not a great matchup, but I see targets, receptions, back-to-back weeks, 8 targets, 6 receptions, over 80 yards each week. I like that, so I'm going to run with it. That's another guy who I like in DFS this week. And we look at good value. There's 2 wide receivers that we have in good value. Let's start with this guy who I'm really high on. You're high on him. I didn't notice. I was looking up numbers earlier today because I actually played a couple of his. I actually played a player prop of his for Thursday Night Football as his as the Commanders taking on the Bears, and that's Curtis Samuel. Samuel has reinvented himself from the guy who we thought was just a gadget player in Carolina to a guy who's a bona fide number 2 wide receiver, and a lot of us thought he was probably going to be the number 3 just because you do have Jahan Dotson there, who's been very solid himself as a rookie, but he's hurt, and Curtis Samuel has become the favorite target of Carson Wentz, Keaton.
Yeah, and it's probably disappointing if you're a Scary Terry owner.
Yeah, Scary Terry has not only has 19 receptions this year.
He's wide receiver, I want to say 31 or 34 on the season,
but still has 326 yards. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Weird setup. He's not getting in the end zone. His name is Scorin' McLaurin, right? One of his many nicknames. If you don't have Scorin' McLaurin, you just have McLaurin on the field. So
yes,
I don't know if that's philosophical or if that's like fake deep or whatever else like that. Curtis Samuel is the 16th wide receiver. Numbers don't have to be deep or anything else like that, but it's a guy that's gotten you double-digit fantasy points in every matchup this season except for one. Here's where I really like Curtis Samuel, though. If you have Curtis Samuel on your roster right now, then you got him for a song. You probably picked him up off waivers, honestly.
Right. So you probably picked him up after week 2 when he scored a touchdown against Detroit. Like, there you go.
There it goes. Now, the issue with Curtis Samuel has typically been in the past that he's going to have these big games where he gets, 15 to 20 touches and scores 2 touchdowns or something like that because they're using him in all these different gadgety sort of ways.
Right.
He hasn't really done that, really. He was a little bit gadgety in week 1 versus Jacksonville. I think he had a rushing touchdown in that game, I want to say, or maybe he had a more significant rushing role in that game than he has in a lot of other games this year. After week 2, we thought maybe he was going to take on like a Deebo Samuel type of role, but not quite that high of expectation. Yeah, but he's been getting his targets and he's been getting his receptions as well. 7 targets in week 4, 8 targets in week 5. He's gotten somewhere around 10 targets in every game this year before that. So you look at all this and you're like, wow, Terry McLaurin is a great option for the Commanders. And you realize, wait, I'm not talking about Terry McLaurin. That's right. I'm talking about Curtis Samuel. So you probably got him for a song. You could use that leverage. You probably haven't added Curtis Samuel to be a wide receiver too. You maybe added him so that you can have a solid flex option. So if and again, if this is your team that you need to add value at a position like running back, Curtis Samuel could be a great trade piece to try and get yourself that very valuable running back that you're looking for that absolutely no one wants to trade for this year. Now, if you want to put value on the board, Curtis Samuel is a guy that adds tremendous value, even if you're trying to leverage it for another position, maybe a top-tier tight end. Maybe your quarterback position is a little wonky. But either way, Curtis Samuel, I think, great in the value department this year.
Love Curtis Samuel. Like I said, I played a player prop of his for Thursday night. I think, what was it? I think it was over 46.5 receiving yards. For Curtis Samuel, 46.5?
Yes. All right, hang on. I got to go take a trip over to the local sports book. That's tremendous. That's easy money, guys. That's absolutely easy money.
Yeah, definitely very good. I saw that and I was like, oh, I'll take that over his receptions because the receptions were a little bit juiced and understandable, right? Because he's getting the targets and he's hitting these receptions.
A lot of short yardage targets.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But receiving yards, I'm like, all right, if he's getting the targets and getting the receptions, he's going to get these receiving yards. So I definitely hit up on that. And then last guy here, when we're talking about good value, it's Hollywood Brown. Brown scored a touchdown in the Cardinals' last game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Cardinals ended up losing that game 20-17. But Hollywood Brown has shockingly been
Been
as
consistent.
advertised. Been very consistent. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's weird because I don't think the offenses haven't really changed from what it is in Baltimore, but for some reason it's somehow clicking in Arizona this season where he has uh 38 receptions for 417 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like I said, scored a touchdown against the Eagles, had 8 receptions for 78 yards and a touchdown. But I guess the difference here in Arizona than it is in Baltimore, Keaton, is he's gotten double-digit targets in 4 out of the 5 games, including a 17 target game against the LA Rams. Now that will change because DeAndre Hopkins is coming back, but again, a guy who you probably drafted late, just saying, I guess we'll see what happens. There's no nuke, so somebody has to catch the ball, and he's exceeded expectations to this point.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the point in the year that if you're going to move them, this is the value section. So this means that if you have these guys on your roster, use the value that they've already accrued to leverage another asset on your team. Marquis Brown, number 6 wide receiver, by the way, on the season to this point, with all the good wide receivers that we've been talking about and all the crazy wide receiver performances, Marquis Brown has been better than every receiver save for 5 in fantasy this year. But that means that he just has tremendously ballooned value for what we know is going to be a drop in production. You had mentioned that game against the Rams this year. He caught 14 passes in that game, 14 catches in a game.
I don't think he even had 14 catches with the Ravens in the game.
Maybe during the course of the entire season, at certain points, it seemed like Marquise Brown was just catching bombs. But this production that we're seeing, 8 receptions for 78 yards last week on 10 targets, 11 targets the week before that, 17 targets. We're going to see those numbers come down some significant amount. You're not going to run this Arizona offense coming into, I guess that'll be week 7 when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, and not understandably have a significant portion of that offense shift his way. DeAndre Hopkins has been the target and the receptions machine in this offense in the past. Yes. I don't expect that to necessarily change. This is one of those situations, though, where it seems like Kingsbury has moved Marquise Brown into Nuke's spot while Nuke is gone, which means when Nuke comes back, guess what? Hollywood Brown's not going to get the same production. Trade him now. There's going to be somebody out there that is licking their chops at the prospect of having the number 6 wide receiver in fantasy right now on their roster, and they'd probably be willing to give up an asset that at this point in the season is going to, or at a later point in the season is going to end up being much more valuable than they are right now. So certainly he is on high on this list of good value guys that you maybe got in a mid-round rather, the second or third tier of wide receivers that you're really concerned about that has ended up giving you top 10 or top 5 wide receiver production. So trade him now. Absolutely. Get this guy, or rather get yourself an elite running back or RB2 even. I think a consistent high-end RB2 for Marquise Brown, that could be of value, I think, and you could get away with that for sure.
100% you can get away with it because, like you said, when Hopkins comes back, those targets he's not going to have double-digit targets. It would be a shocker if he did, because you then also have to factor in Zach Ertz at tight end, who's been very consistent since getting into Arizona last year. So yeah, with Hopkins, with Ertz, Brown will kind of fall to like third fiddle ish. That's not saying that he won't be utilized. He will be utilized, but the receptions will go down just a little bit, which, like you said, could open up the door to move him now for something that you may need, that you might want to take a flyer on, maybe a Kyle Pitts, right? Or maybe a Adam Thielen, 2 guys who haven't really shown up, but it's a long season. They might start, they might start figuring it out. You never know. You never know, right? Or even a Hunter Renfrow, the guys that might figure it out later in the year. So there's just some names to look out for, or some names that you might want to trade if you have these guys on your roster, or even if you don't have them on your roster and you're trying to seek out some options. Those are 4 wide receivers who you can either get in your league as free agents, or you can make a trade for them and get them right now, which you should probably not wait until next week because value, the stock might go up a little bit quickly. So we're at the last portion of the podcast. So again, appreciate everybody for tuning in and checking out the pod. We really appreciate it. We gotta talk anytime touchdowns, but we don't have no picks for y'all just because the sports books are a little late with the selections. They don't have a lot of games posted right now. I think DraftKings only has 2 up. FanDuel only has FanDuel, BetMGM only has Commanders Bears. So if you want the picks, we'll have the picks out on Twitter. I will tweet them out on the Total Sports Live Twitter account for people who want those picks. However, we would like to give ourselves a pat on the back because we did hit a 3-leg anytime touchdown parlay last week.
Won some money.
The combination, and we told you guys, we spoke it up. We spoke up the first two. We spoke up the first two. Stephon Diggs and Nick Chubb. And then the plus 200 haymaker, DK Metcalf. Boom. I threw it in there, and it all came together. I was tempted to do George Pickens instead of DK, but I said, ooh, plus 300. I don't know.
That's really high.
Yeah, that's really high. I was like, DK, yeah, I think DK can score a touchdown. And it happened very, very quickly. It took off. And it took off in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and every once in a while, this is a prediction industry. Anytime that you hear or you see something along these lines, it's so easy to be wrong. For sure that you got to celebrate the W's in this as well. We keep telling you here on the show, the stuff that we tell you here is going to make you some money. And this is one of those times that if you followed us by the letter, you made some money. And by the way, this has been going on since last year, Joe. We talked about the money that we've been getting, folks, with anytime touchdowns. I think that is our specialty, and that's a potential future name of the podcast or something like that. That's how good we are at this. So just saying it, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, man. I mean, like you said, this is not no one thing that we just everybody's doing it, so we just started doing it. No, if you've been listening to the pod, if you was listening to the sports podcast, we were definitely dropping those picks for you guys just on a whim here and there, just check out this guy, check out that guy. So it's not no fly by night type of organization.
We're not just saying it. Go follow TSL right now.
Right, exactly. So yeah, last week we hit it. I went on DraftKings. I had a 25% odds boost that I saw on that they was giving out for Football Sunday. So
love it when a plan comes together.
I turned a 953 parlay to a 1,191 plus odds and got Diggs for minus 105, Nick Chubb for minus 130, which I knew was going to be that, but I was willing to pay for it just because we got DK plus 205 and wagered a nice $10. Came back with a 129. We came back with a 129 winner. And then, like I said, it developed really fast. It was I'm looking back at the text now. It was got Chubb at 110.
I'm telling you, it was quick.
Then 8 minutes later I was Metcalf. I'm almost there. And then at 209, Keaton goes and boom goes the dynamite.
And
that's
boom
when we
goes
got
the dynamite. Right.
Stephon Diggs. Literally, that's always the greatest feeling in a parlay. When you target, obviously, you don't subconsciously target all 1 o'clock games, but when all 1 o'clock games and then they all just happen. And when you get 2 in the first 8 minutes, you really feel good about yourself because now it's just all right,
just looking for that one.
Games not over. Games are not 1 o'clock. Games not over till 4 o'clock. Oh, okay. All right. We definitely got time to sit and watch to see what's going to happen.
It's exciting. And that's why you watch the game every Sunday.
Yeah, that's why I watched the game. And Diggs gave us a little scare because I was oh man, he's dropping some passes in this end zone. And I'm like Gabe Davis. Davis scoring all the touchdowns
on the Steelers D.
I was oh damn. I was we should have picked Gabe Davis instead. I was oh no.
Imagine what the odds would have been on that, right?
Oh man, that would have been sick. But that was definitely a nice little fun hit. And again, that's for sure. That's the fun here on the podcast, taking the information and things that we give you guys, but then also putting in the practice, right? We're not just telling you guys this and just be go ahead and do it. No, we're actually putting
our money where our mouth is.
Right, we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're putting, even when it comes to fantasy, we're putting our theories and things into practice because we're telling you these things because either A, we did it, or B, we might contemplating and thinking
we
about
fixing
doing
to
it.
do it. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely keep following us. Listen to the show every time we drop one. Every time we drop a pod. We do this pretty much on the weekly basis too. So you can
Yeah,
be
it's
making
become a
money
weekly
every
thing
week.
now.
You can make money
Yeah,
every week, man.
you could. Literally.
Yeah.
You most certainly could. So like we said, no picks this week, but me and the fellas will be texting
We will be
on probably
releasing
on
that schedule
Thursday.
to you.
Yeah, probably Friday. We'll come up with a list of guys and we'll put the list out there on Twitter for all you
Yeah.
to, make your picks. And hey, put you can play them single, you can put any combination together, let it roll and see what happens. So
Yes, sir.
that's gonna wrap up the pod. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, make sure you are following Total Sports Live on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's probably on iHeart. It's probably anywhere you can get podcasts. I know Anchor just pushes it out to like all podcast avenues. So wherever you listen to your podcast, I'm pretty sure you can find Total Sports Live Podcast, TSL Podcast. Hit the subscribe button. Leave us a rating, especially on Spotify. You can do that now. So leave us a rating. That'd be very cool of you to do. And then also make sure you're checking out TotalSportsLive.com. A lot of good content on there from the guys. Matt Brown and Nick been doing a great job with the Eagles stuff. Doing their Matt with the weekly recap, Nick with the game previews, Harrison has done an excellent job covering college football this season. UPenn going to check out the Quakers, who are undefeated still in the Ivy. So definitely a lot about that. Seth has a story up there on the site about James Harden, as well as this could be a big year for him. So anything that you need, it's right there, TotalSportsLive.com. So make sure you are checking out the website. Yes, it is still up and running. Make sure make sure you're checking it out. So for me and Keaton, I think that's about it. I don't know if there's anything else we need to plug here.
That's all I got on my dock. And follow me at Keaton D. Nichols.
Yep,
I don't post all that much, but you'll enjoy following me.
Yeah,
I don't know how that makes sense, but it will. It's at Keaton D. Nichols.
At Keaton D. Nichols, at Jovan. That's where you can follow us at. Again, everyone have a good one. Enjoy the football this weekend. Don't know how much you're going to enjoy the Thursday night game, but that's all right. Enjoy the football, and we'll be back next week. Looking forward to week 7. Probably talk about which tight ends to trade for. I know that's going to be horrible.
It's going to be a rough segment to prepare for, but we'll do it anyway.
Yeah, we'll make it work the best way possible. So for me and Keaton, everyone have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.